Call the meeting to order. Could we have a moment of silence, please? Thank you. First order of business is the adoption of the agenda.
Move for adoption.
Second.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the agenda is adopted as shown. Committee reports. I think we have a comp plan committee report. Chris?
Sir, Mr. Chairman, the Comp Plan Committee did meet back on August 26th. We covered a couple topics, one being treatment of public facilities and PPEA planning in the comp plan, something that we'll be following up on with some additional information from staff. Also, we discussed the Southern Frederick Area Plan in that update process, and particularly discussed a upcoming public input session, which will be on Wednesday, September 25th at 7 p.m. That's next Wednesday at Ayler Middle School. And I believe Mr. Ruddy will be sharing a little bit more information about that under other later this evening. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Mr. Unger, I think the Sanitation Committee met last night.
Yes, sir, we met last night. Report, total customer base for water is 13,875. Sanitation is 13,394. The difference from last quarter was 49, which is up a good bit. They are getting some new customers. Rainfall for last month was 2.66, which was down a little bit from the previous month, but it was way high. It was 5.72. Average monthly is 3.64, and we're doing pretty good right for this year right now. The Deal plant was, we drew 2.29 million gallon per day. The Anderson plant, we drew 2.3 million gallon per day. We purchased 0.82 million gallon per day from the city. The daily average was 5.45 million gallon per day, down a little bit from last month. There was really no explanation for that, but it wasn't a lot though. Deal plant went down a couple feet from last month, about 2 feet, which is kind of normal for this time of year, but still looking good. Anderson plant, they're not getting a good reading on that. There's something happened to the elevation in there of the floats, so we don't really know what that one is, but it's not real bad though. The flows for the Parkers Mill plant were average, or actually above average from what it has been, so they're doing real good there. Did have one customer come in from H.P. Hood. They're expanding their facilities over there. They're spending about $6 million on the facility, and they haven't gotten a good contract from sanitation department about getting water and sewer yet and releasing sewer, because they're releasing more phosphate than the plant can handle, so they're trying to work that out with Hood, and hopefully they'll get that resolved within the next month. And one other thing we had was sprinklers. When we're running water into plants and things like that, from now on, when it leaves the property line, in the past, the sanitation department has been responsible for the water line up to the building, and now they're going to change that, and it's going to, whoever owns the building will be responsible for that new line going into it, which is going to be a little bit more expensive to a developer now, but the sanitation department just can't afford to go in and fix things, when it doesn't belong to them. So that was passed and accepted, so they're going to end up doing that. And that's all we had.
Thank you. See, we have a representative from Winchester Planning. Do you have any comments or report?
I do. I'll just update you on the two items that we discussed yesterday at our meeting. We had a rezoning at 317 South Cameron Street. Probably most of us know that as the old jail. And that rezoning was recommended to be approved by the City Council. It's currently RB1, and it would be to convert it to B1. And the second item on the agenda was a initiation of a text amendment regarding a timeline for tabling rezoning requests, so that I'll be back before us next month for public hearing. It's a short meeting.
Thank you. Are there any committee reports that I missed?
Yes, I'm happy to report that the Development Consults Committee completed their first tasks. We had a good number of respondents on the various questions on implementation of the urban centers and traditional neighborhood districts. Those have been compiled. The planning office has those, and they intend to they'll forward those on to the board for their use in the next planning workshop.
Thank you, Mr. Dunlap. Any other committee meetings that I missed?
It's okay.
Thank you. This is the time we reserve for citizen comments. If there's anybody that would like to speak on any subject other than the rezoning of the overlook, please come up and identify yourself, the district you're from, and provide your comments. Having seen none, we'll go on to our first item on the agenda, our only item on the agenda, which is a public hearing, rezoning application 04-13, the Overlook. It's to rezone 55.46 acres as follows: 14.183 acres from RP district to RA district, 7.098 acres from RP district to B2 district, 10.04 acres from RA district to RP district, 24.145 acres to remain residential performance, RP district. There are proffers. The property is located on the south side of Berryville Pike, Route 7, near and adjoining the Valley Mill Road intersection. It's identified by 10 property identification numbers, and it's in the Redbud Magisterial District. Mr. Ruddy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission. As we review this rezoning application, I think it's in a property that is somewhat familiar to members of the Planning Commission. Previous incarnation was the Carriage Park rezoning. The Carriage Park rezoning was approved by the Board of Supervisors back in 2007. So this is kind of, again, a reincarnation of that property, in addition to a more thorough package, if you will, including the surrounding properties. As you pointed out, the property for which the rezoning is being requested is south of Route 7, not too far away from the Clark County boundary. It's highlighted on the screen to your left with the parcels that are surrounded with the heavy black line, if you will. As you can see, a majority of the properties are currently zoned RP, and that was part of the Carriage Park rezoning, and abounds the property. Both sides of existing Valley Mill Road is zoned RA, rural areas. Put on the screen to your left, the generalized development plan that came with the Carriage Park project. Again, that was what was approved, and it's important, I think, to recognize that, and also compare, if you will, the project that's in front of us today, knowing what was previously approved in this location. As we move from that background, one thing I'll point out, and on the screen to your left now, is the generalized development plan that is proffered with this current rezoning application for the Overlook. Very, very straightforward, very simple. It provides a variety of different things, and I think you can very clearly see the relocation of Valley Mill Road as it runs through the property. It also shows its intersection with Route 7. It shows the area of the commercial land use, the residential land bay to the north and west of the relocated Valley Mill Road. And then, of course, on the south and east of relocated Valley Mill Road, that's to remain rural areas. Rural areas, again, surrounding the environmental features, the Abrams Creek, and of course the existing Valley Mill Farm, historical agricultural resource here in Frederick County. So the generalized development plan that the applicant has proffered with their application, I think, speaks to how the project would be developed in the future, and is pretty straightforward. As we recognize that the rezoning application and the RP and B2 designations that we saw in that generalized development plan is consistent with the county's comprehensive plan. Approximately a year ago, the Sense and Eastern Frederick Urban Area Plan was approved, and that basically recognized the relocation of Valley Mill Road as they have picked it up. It recognized the areas of residential and commercial land uses, again, just as the applicant has reflected it in their application. When we look at the RP zoning designation that would allow approximately 6 to 10 units an acre with our revised RP standards. Previously, I think 240 residential units were proffered with the Carriage Park rezoning application. The current RP at 34 acres and those densities would perhaps allow for a little bit more, but again, consistent with the RP designations of the comprehensive plan. The biggest component of this application may well be considered the transportation improvements, and that is the relocation of Valley Mill Road. It provides a much better connection there with Route 7, the ultimate design right-of-way for the 4-lane connection of Valley Mill Road, and the initial construction of the intersection at Route 7 and Valley Mill Road, and the ultimate section back to the commercial entrance, transitioning back to a 2-lane section to the existing Valley Mill Road. So it can be easily said that the transportation package with this project is consistent with and furthers the county's comprehensive plan. Many of the potential impacts have been addressed with the proffer package. I won't go through them all, but it's important to recognize that the applicant has mitigated those through a variety of methods, access, transportation improvements, and also a development impact model is recognized. There is a point there, of course, that's the 2012 as opposed to 2013 numbers, but generally speaking, the impacts associated with this request have been addressed by the application. The two items that we would consider here again, the dollar value is 2012 versus 2013, possibly the transition when the application was submitted. And as pointed out in Mr. Bishop's comment regarding the entrances serving the development, the applicant has proposed 4. Transportation would prefer 3, but there's the 2 items to be considered with this application. Again, it's a much cleaner application and thorough and certainly consistent with the comprehensive plan that has been presented to the county. And ultimately, this evening, we're seeking Planning Commission's recommendation on this application to the Board of Supervisors. There were a good number of proffers committed to with the original rezoning, and of course, this new one has a fairly substantial and thorough rezoning proffer package associated with it. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them, and also to recognize Mr. Evan Wyatt is here this evening representing the application.
Is there any questions for staff? Before we go to Mr. Wyatt, Mr. Bishop, would you like to add anything or comment on the transportation proffers or the number of entrances? Any questions for Mr. Bishop?
Thank you.
Mr. Wyatt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. I'm Evan Wyatt with Greenway Engineering. I'm also with me this evening, Mike Lickman, who prepared the traffic study for the rezoning, and Mr. and Mrs. Stafford, who are the property owners and the applicant in the rezoning. I'll try not to be too redundant, but I do think there's some backstory that we need to cover to get to where we are this evening. And the first one is the slide that Mike had previously shown, which shows the proffered generalized development plan for the Carriage Park rezoning, which was approved by the county back in 2007. Valley Mill Road, as it exists today, comes out to Route 7 at a median crossing in this location. And the proposal at that point in time was to take a road off of the bend before you get to Route 7 into the property and to develop it for 240 townhouse units. That property was rezoned and approved right before the economy took a nosedive. So the project sat there, and the property owner that had this rezoning done ended up losing the property to the bank. And then the bank ended up going ahead and having the property put up for sale, which is why the Staffords purchased the property. The opportunity then became where we could actually work and facilitate a project that has been talked about for at least 15 years, It was actually discussed back when I worked for Frederick County, and that was to try to get Valley Mill Road relocated to a better point on Route 7. This is something that VDOT, in particular Jerry Kopp, has been working towards for many years. And once again, the Staffords who owned this property before they purchased the Carriage Park assemblage now have the opportunity where we can work with one property owner to get Valley Mill Road relocated in a fashion out to Route 7 and discard the existing location here. Mike mentioned that the county had amended the comprehensive plan, the Cincinnati Road Area Plan. What it calls for is a couple things. It calls for commercial land use opportunity at the Route 7 Valley Mill Road relocated intersection area. It calls for residential past that. And then it also proposes the relocation of Valley Mill Road, which would then align with the future Route 37 off-ramp in this general location. The property that's in the yellow on the plan is what's currently zoned today. And back in 2007, when this was rezoned, the idea was to rezone all the property, get the gross density to a point where they could then do some meaningful development in the area, and that's what came forward. Since the rezoning, the county's relooked your ordinance. The Part 402 RP district revisions were one of the key parts of it, and I think it was good work by the commission and the board. Basically, what you've done is you've recognized the urban development area. You've said within the area we should promote density, and so because of that, we were actually able to do some creative things with this particular zoning application. You see that before everything was in the yellow, now we're able to do a couple things. Number one, to conform with the comprehensive plan, we have created a land bay that's commercial down near Route 7 and Valley Mill Road relocated intersection. The portions of the property that would be best suited for residential development are left RP, and then the properties that are less enticing for residential development, we're actually down zoning. There's going to be two things that happen with the properties. This portion of the property will actually be absorbed into the Stafford Farm, and then the portions down here will be dedicated to VDOT for future improvements when they deal with Route 7 and when Route 37 interchange comes in. So those were some of the creative things we were able to do with zoning as a result of your ordinance amendment that was adopted a couple years ago. And as a result of that, we end up with this concept plan. This is a proffered generalized development plan. Once again, it talks about Valley Mill Road relocated, RP property, B2. This is part of the RA that's going to be dedicated to VDOT along the frontage of Route 7. And then this is the remaining downzone property that would be absorbed into the Stafford Farm. The proffers that we are offering for this, of course, they provide for the complete right-of-way for the ultimate section of Valley Mill Road. They proffer that whether the first phase of development starts with the commercial or the residential, that is part of that first phase of development, Valley Mill Road is constructed from its existing alignment to Route 7. There's a new signal, a new median, turn lanes on Route 7. The section that goes from the signal to the commercial land bay, the full section of that is built, and then it transitions to a two-lane section back to here, but it would have turn lanes associated with the residential entrances. The two items that staff presented, I'll deal with the less complicated one first. There was a comment about entrances along Valley Mill Road. When you start with Route 7 and you work your way towards Valley Mill Road, the distance between here and here is about 500 feet. From here to here is about 650, and about 700. The VDOT standards for access management along collector roads actually allow entrances every 335 feet in a situation through here. And then when you have a signalized intersection to come back to an unsignalized entrance, they require 440 feet. So theoretically, if we had not shown limited entrances, we would be actually entitled by VDOT code to put in 5 entrances along the residential property. We didn't think that was appropriate. The distances between these entrances are actually twice what VDOT would allow us to do. The proffer also requires these entrances to have the turn lanes, so when traffic is coming into these entrances, it's not holding up traffic that's just through movement traffic. The second thing is, the way the topography works for this property, it starts off fairly low. It comes up to a point which is fairly level, and then it really drops off down here. So the entrance for the commercial, we've pushed as far back into the land bay as we can to achieve access to that land bay. The 2 entrances here on the higher part of the property, we have an environmental feature here, and by doing entrances here, we can avoid impacts to that. Also, for emergency services standpoint, it gives them a couple ways in and out of the higher part of the project where the more intensive development for residential is going to occur. So with the issue of entrances, once again, we actually are reducing what we would be allowed to do by code. So we feel we are addressing access management in that regard. And plus, with the road construction plan, the turn lanes will not impede traffic that's through movement traffic. The issue with the fiscal impact model, we had put together the rezoning package. We were somewhat concerned with proffering the full amount of the 2012 proffers. One of the things we had in an earlier version of the proffer statement was recognition of commercial credit when it developed. That was something that raised a concern with staff, and so after we talked about it, we removed our ability to gain commercial credit from the proffer. We pretty much had the package ready to go in March. We had a proffer in there that basically stated that the board would support a revenue sharing application for this project because that is how this project will get built. You're talking about, less than 300 residential units and about 40,000 square feet of commercial to put in a lot of road improvements. So there's assistance that's needed there. And the county attorney was not comfortable with us having the commitment for revenue sharing in the proffer. So when we talked about it, we agreed that we would do a separate document that would be considered by the Board of Supervisors, basically a development agreement that says we commit to doing this and the board would commit to doing a couple things, which includes supporting revenue sharing and also supporting the abandonment of the portion of Valley Mill Road that's shown on the GDP in green. That, of course, took some time to cobble together and to go back and forth through that, which is why we're here this evening instead of back in March when we could have filed. We think that what we've done with the proffers that we're providing, with the right-of-way that's being dedicated, that we're not seeking value credit for the commercial development that will happen, that we're not seeking value credit for, that we believe that what we've done is sufficient in this application. If we had known that there was a need to beat the clock, if you will, we would have gone ahead and filed this in March, gotten through the public hearing process, and then circled back with the board and worked out the development agreement. So hopefully that explains the two issues, at least from our perspective. I'll be happy to answer any questions. And once again, Mr. Glickman's here if you have questions about the traffic study.
Thank you, Evan. Is there any questions for Mr. Wyatt? Anyone?
Yeah, I just got one.
Yes.
I think Eric answered it, but I'd just like for it to be announced. I had a neighbor that was concerned about being landlocked on Eddy Lane.
Mm-hmm.
Just wanted insurance that he won't be landlocked.
The way that this project is working, VDOT and the county want the median to be removed because we're introducing a new median with a signal here. So our proffer commits to removing the median component as part of our development program. That still allows for traffic coming down Route 7 to turn right in and turn right out. The traffic that wants to go left towards the city of Winchester, which currently comes out here and does this, there's a median crossing right here. They would need to go up to that and U-turn. It's a couple hundred more feet down the road, but they would have the ability to certainly turn right and left as they do today, or right in and right out as they do today, and then they'd have to go down the road to make the left to come back to Winchester. So it does not landlock their property.
Any other questions for Mr. Wyatt?
Just one. What becomes of the Stafford property? What is that designated for there, Evan?
It's zoned agricultural. There is a house, which is the home place, which Mr. and Mrs. Stafford reside in, which is actually on the state and national register.
Okay.
Their intention is to keep the farm as they previously had it and to take the traffic burden from
Yeah,
in
okay.
front of their house away from it.
I know where you're at there on that. Okay, thanks.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Mr. Wyatt.
Thank you. I'll be available if you have more questions.
This is a public hearing. Would anyone like to speak in favor or against or raise comments and questions on this rezoning application? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Planning commissioners? Questions? Mr. Oates?
Well, I'd just like to say that Carriage Park rezoning back in 2007 was, in my opinion, a horrible rezoning, so it wouldn't take much to make anything better here. I don't know why the board ever voted for it or the planning commission, but yeah, I support this because it's definitely an improvement.
Agreed.
Mr. Chairman.
Anyone else?
Admittedly, I wasn't around for the 2007 rezoning, but after reviewing this, I think this is a vast improvement over what I saw that was previously approved. I like the transportation aspect of this. I like the connection to Route 7 in that it will probably have a lot less environmental impact than the previous application. I note staff's comments about the DIM value contribution as well as the number of entrances. I don't have an issue with the value that's been proffered. That was a value that was in place at the time the application was filed. I don't have a problem with the number of entrances proposed on Valley Mill Road. I note that I think it was about 4 or 5 years ago that VDOT implemented some new standards that they were looking for multiple access points. So VDOT sometimes can't make up their mind what they want to do, but nonetheless, given the length of roadway and what's likely to be the number of land bays, I think the number of entrances are appropriate.
Okay,
I
thank you.
support this application.
Mr. Triplett, did you,
No, I really didn't. I'm just a comment. I support this because I was here in 2007, and I didn't like it then, and I'm sure there was others that didn't like it. I also would like to say that I appreciate the time that we had with Mr. Wyatt to go over this. It was really helpful, so when we came in here tonight, we knew what we were talking about more than a lot of times when we come in here, so I appreciate your time.
okay, thank you. Anything else? We've made this a little too easy on Mr. Wyatt tonight. Mr. Moan?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I was going to make it even easier. If there are no other comments, I was going to make a motion that the Planning Commission recommend approval of rezoning application number 04-13 of the Overlook.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Mr. Unger?
Unger, yes.
Marston, yes.
Ambrogi, yes.
Manuel, yes.
Crockett, yes.
Oates, yes.
Kenny, yes.
Triplett, yes.
Dunlap, yes.
Moan, yes.
And Thomas votes yes. So this has been recommended for approval. It will go to the Board of Supervisors at their 9 October 2013 meeting. Thank you. The only other thing we have on the meeting, we have adjourned, but I'll just remind everybody, there's a green sheet or aqua or blue, not sure what color it is, but in front of everyone with your pertinent information on. If there's any corrections to that, please correct it and give it back to staff. Also would remind everybody, it was mentioned, the Southern Frederick Area Plan kickoff meeting. Mr. Ruddy, would you like to say anything about this?
Mr. Thomas. Yes, next Wednesday evening will be a kickoff meeting for the Southern Frederick Land Use Plan. It's kind of the next planning effort down in the southern part of the county, following on from our Sensney Eastern Frederick Land Use Plan. We'll follow much the same pattern. The meeting, again, is next Wednesday night. As you can see on the screen to your left, that's on the county's website. We've set up a page for it where people can hopefully follow along, get more information. There are a couple of maps on there that identify the area. Again, for all our neighbors down in the Stevens City area, if you're interested, follow along, come to the meeting, and we'll hopefully put you to work like we did folks in the Sensney Road area. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions?
Are we going to be having a meeting in 2 weeks?
Looks like we won't. Okay, do we need a motion to cancel that meeting, please?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Looks like that meeting's canceled. If there's no other business for tonight, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
No one's opposed, so. Thank you.